Hello and welcome to today's episode, which is a foray into the world of fermentation with another Instant Pot tempeh. A couple of years ago I made two different tempehs using the Instant Pot and it worked perfectly. I was doing some research and I can't remember what it was for now, but I've ended up on a website, I think it's called tempehtation.co.uk. I'll find the link and stick it in the description for you. And it had recipes for buckwheat tempeh and butterbean tempeh. I thought that sounds really great. I'm going to give that a go. I made the tempeh last week. I've not been well again. It's an ongoing thing if you're new to the channel. Chronic pain, chronic fatigue, lots of other BS that's really difficult to live with day to day. Fun. I still wanted to film something, but I did everything in close up, and then my plan had been to pick it up the next day, do this part of it, and just couldn't. So I'm hoping this is still okay. I've looked at it, there's no mold, so hopefully. So here is the buckwheat tempeh. So you can see the network of mycelium around the buckwheat grains. And then here, unfortunately, is the butterbean one, which clearly hasn't worked. I think I know what went wrong with the butterbean one, so I figured I'd leave it in the video and then people can kind of learn from the failure sort of thing rather than just hiding things away and pretending that everything's perfect all the time. I figured it'd be useful to share some information. While I talk you through what I did, I'm going to heat up a cast iron pan and I'll fry off a little slice and do some tasting. I'll link to that first tempeh video down in the description. I made two different types using different beans and grains and things, so I won't go as deep in the process as I did that time. We'll ignore the butterbean one for now. Unfortunately, I've accidentally thrown away the piece of paper that I'd written all my weights and measurements down on. Super helpful, Rachel. I think I remember them and I can also put them on screen because I think I took a shot of them on the close-up camera as I was filming. But I took, I want to say 170 grams of buckwheat groats, which is about a cup. Rinse those under cold water just to get off any starches or any bits of debris or anything that were in there. I used this pan to boil the buckwheat in, and it worked quite well. I was a bit worried that it was all going to boil over because it was, it wasn't a small amount of buckwheat. But as long as you just keep the heat down, which also ends up saving a bit of energy, so that's a bit of a bonus, save a few pennies. Filled this pan just over a half with water and then added 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, and that inhibits bad mold growth. This is mold. All of that's Rhizopus oligosporus, but we don't want any of the nasty, dangerous molds growing on there. Once the water came up to a boil, added in the buckwheat groats, put a lid on. Once it boiled, I dropped it down to a simmer. I put it on 3, mine goes up to 9, so you want a very low heat. And with the lid on, it keeps it hotter as well, so you don't need to use as much electricity. After 5 or 6 minutes, once it goes tender, I then just drained it in a sieve. Whatever you're using to make your tempeh, whether it's traditional soybeans, or the chickpeas, cowpeas, that kind of thing that I made last time, it needs to be dry. The stuff, you can't put tempeh starter on wet things because I think it encourages bad mold and inhibits the good mold. I spread my buckwheat out into a baking pan and then flattened it down into a kind of even layer and then spooned through it every 5 minutes or so to let the steam escape. But the house is really cold at the moment. It's like 14, 15 degrees. Which is mid-50s, I guess, in Fahrenheit, something like that. So in the end, I just popped it in the oven for a little bit, 10 minutes maybe at 180, and just kept stirring it every couple of minutes. I put the cooked groats into a big mixing bowl and then sprinkled on 1 or 2 teaspoons of gluten-free flour. The convention is rice flour. I didn't have any. So I thought, well, gluten-free flour, it's got rice in there and potato starch, that kind of thing. I thought, give that a try and see if it works. It seems to have, at least. Mixed it all together and I did a teaspoon of the tempeh starter. This is the starter I use. You might see it as inoculum. So this is powdered Rhizopus oligosporus. This does also have rice powder in it, so maybe I didn't need to add that extra bit, but I don't think it's caused any problems adding that extra. I think I paid £3.50, maybe £4 for 35 grams, so it's not super expensive. I got this off eBay. This tub that I put it in, the Chinese takeaway, I just punched loads of little holes into it and then just packed it into there nice and tightly. You don't want it really tight because otherwise there's not going to be any space for the mycelium, like the little threads of the mold. There won't be enough space for them to grow, but reasonably tight, otherwise you end up with just the mycelium and then it's just a bit airy kind of thing. The alternative is to put it in a Ziploc bag and punch holes into the bag that way. Done that successfully in the past. I set up the Instant Pot with a little bit of water at the bottom because it needs to be slightly wet for the Instant Pot to work. It can't run dry as far as I'm aware. Put a rack in the bottom, put the tub on top of that. Initially I used this lid just like I did in the other video, but because of the cats, I had a really bad feeling that they were going to brush against the side of it because they're big, meaty boys. I was worried that they'd knock the lid off overnight and then I wouldn't know about it for, 12 hours or so. So in the end, I just put the Instant Pot lid on. I use the yogurt setting on low. I think my memory from doing that first video is it's around 30 degrees, which is a really good temperature for making yogurt. If you haven't got an Instant Pot, you can still make it. There are a few different methods that you can use. If you live in a fairly warm climate, just wrap it in a little towel or something and pop it somewhere out of the way where it's not going to get disturbed, and keep checking on it every day or so, and just make sure that, there's no massive amounts of condensation or anything. Alternatively, you can do it in the oven with, just put the oven light on and the heat from the lamp is enough to start the process. I've also heard you can use a food dehydrator. I had wanted to do it in the video, do half in the Instant Pot and half in the dehydrator, but in the end, I didn't have enough energy. So I thought just do the Instant Pot one for now. Because the butter bean one failed, I'm gonna do another video fairly soonish. Probably weeks, who knows. And I'll do a variety of different beans, and I'll maybe do half in the Instant Pot, half in the dehydrator, just to see if there's any difference and how well it works. The yogurt setting is at 24 hours, so I left it in there for that long. Had a look, could see the butter beans weren't really doing anything, but this one was pretty much looked the same. So I thought I'll give it another few hours just to see if the butter bean one suddenly sprang to life. So I think I had it in another 5 hours, so maybe say 30 hours altogether. And no, nothing. Just check it check it every couple of hours, because it's kind of fun to see things as it happens. But as soon as you can see a really good development of the mycelium, it's ready, take it out. So now it's time to decant it, slice it, and do some numbing. It's a fairly sturdy thing. It's slightly bending, but it's not just collapsing or anything, which is a good sign that there's a nice development of all the mold. So here's a little brick of it. So you can see all the little grains, and they're all entombed in mold. The texture of it, it's nice and firm, a little bit springy. Let's do a little slicey slice. A piece about that big, I think. Ooh, that's worked really well. It kind of reminds me of a Rice Krispie treat in appearance. Cast iron should be nice and hot now, so I'll chuck it in the pan, see what happens. Slide it in. Cooks up well, holds its body for the most part, it doesn't just collapse. Let's have a little try. This is going to be very bland because I've not put anything on it. It's got a slightly boozy note to it. And I remember reading, if you make tempeh with rice, it starts fermenting the grain and gets that kind of, almost like beer. It's softer than traditional tempeh, like made with soybeans, but that would make sense because it's been made with a grain kind of thing. So it's going to have a different mouthfeel, but as a starting point, other than that mildly boozy taste, it just tastes like tempeh. So I think that week in the fridge has done it no harm at all, which is a massive relief. Buckwheat has the advantage of being a complete protein. It contains all of the essential amino acids that humans need. So if you're soy-free, either allergy or just don't like it for whatever reason, it's a good option for you to give that a try. You could mix a bit of quinoa in there as well, and that'll give you an extra bit of texture. Just don't put too much in. The problem is with quinoa, because it's so small, you end up losing some of the spaces in between the grains, so there's not much room for the mycelium to grow into. Block of tempeh that big, I do possibly 2-3 tablespoons of the quinoa, cooked quinoa. Do it a bit at a time, mix it through, and once you can see a kind of light distribution of the quinoa, then you're good to go. Yeah, you just don't want to overload it. For more texture, you can also put things in like flaked almonds. That'll give a nice bit of crunch. You could put seeds in there. I put pumpkin seeds in the other one, sesame seeds in the other one. I mean, it might be worth trying it with cooked pasta. Maybe, I don't know, just to see. Anything that you can think of that will add a little bit of crunch and texture, or a difference in texture, I should say. It'd be worth throwing in there and give it a try. And the ingredients are fairly inexpensive. So if you hate it, you've only wasted 20 pence, maybe something like that. I think the bag of buckwheat, it was a kilo bag, and I want to say it was maybe £2, and I used, 200 grams of it, well, 170 grams of it. So it's not a massively expensive thing to experiment with. If you enjoy watching the results of cooking experiments, make sure to like this video and then subscribe to the channel. It's something that I do quite regularly. On to the failure of the butter bean tempeh. When I found that recipe on the website, It said because tinned beans often have sugar and salt in them, that can inhibit the mold. So it takes longer and you have to put in more starter. The can of beans I used didn't have any salt and sugar, so I thought, oh, winner, nice one. But it does have firming agents, calcium chloride, which I'm assuming they put in there to stop the beans going mushy, and also antioxidants. So they've used ascorbic acid. I think that's vitamin C. I might be wrong. I'll stick a note on screen if I am. And then also sodium metabisulfite. My instinct is that they've either killed the mold outright or just radically inhibited it. Because even, leaving after 30 hours, it didn't look any different at all. And it got to the point where I thought, I can't keep running the Instant Pot, even though it's on a thermostat, so it turns itself on and off. It's not on constantly. I'll run you through how to do the bean one, because what I'd suggest is maybe getting some dried beans and soaking them yourself, cooking them yourself, and then you know exactly what's in there. Don't put any salt or anything in the soaking liquid or in the cooking water. I rinse the beans straight from the can, just rinse them off in the sieve to get all that gloopy liquid off, and then patted them dry a little bit. It was a 400 gram tin, which when you drain it, I think is 240 grams of beans. That's another good reason to make your own, really, because you get more bean for your buck. I cut them into quarters because butter beans are fairly big. If you leave things that big, again, you're going to end up with massive voids that will just then be filled up with fluffy mycelium, so there's not much texture. And then sprinkled over half a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. To dry the beans off, I put it in a bowl in the microwave in a single layer, and then just pinged it for 30 seconds, stirred it, and then just repeated that until all of the vinegar liquid had disappeared. And the kind of beans looked a little bit dry and powdery almost. Added them into the bowl, scattered over a little bit of the gluten-free flour again, and I did 2 teaspoons of the starter. If I hadn't made the buckwheat one and been so successful with that, I might have questioned the starter, but because this one's worked perfectly, I know it's nothing to do with the starter. It could be there wasn't enough air holes in the bag, but I mean, I doubt it. Because if that was the case, I would have thought I'd see growth around the holes and then not in the rest of it, but there's just no growth whatsoever. If you want to do it in a Ziploc, you can either poke the holes first and then pack it in, or pack it in and then poke the holes in. I think the first time I made it, I poked the holes in first. The bag becomes a bit fragile because if you're trying to pack everything in nice and tight, you can risk tearing the bag. If you're going to do the stabbing thing, make sure whatever you're stabbing it with is sterile. Everything needs to be super, super clean when you're doing this, because nothing's being taken above 60 degrees until you cook it. So there's lots of opportunity for bad pathogens to develop, which we really need to not have, because that makes your bum squirty at best. So yeah, in the future, I'm thinking I've got mung beans in the cupboard, the little green ones. Have a rummage when I go to the Chinese supermarket, or maybe pick up a few different beans that I've not tried before. Then we'll do like maybe 3 or 4 different types, and I'll do a half batch in the Instant Pot and half in the dehydrator, just to see what the results are. I think the Instant Pot is going to be the cheapest way of doing it because it's on the thermostat and it's got very, very thickly insulated walls, so you're not going to have much heat leakage. Whereas the dehydrator, it's just a constant heat and fan. It only uses a very small amount of electricity, but the Instant Pot uses even less. I'm now going to roll into another video where I make chilies braised in mirin, like a Japanese rice wine. In my mind, I was like, I'll serve it over tofu. But I'm not going to serve it over this, because I think that's going to be delicious. Because the chilies I'll cook with some onions, and that'll have a nice bit of texture in there, which will go really nicely with that kind of simplicity of the tempeh. I'll post the link to that once it's published, maybe stick in a card, something like that. I'm going to say a great big hello and thank you to my community over on Patreon. Really nice to have people who support and appreciate what I'm trying to do, and with the knowledge I share and entertainment I hopefully provide. If you want access to that other bonus content, I do things like recipe walkthroughs, share any acting projects that I've got on the go, and also progress on my craft projects that I seem to have many of at the moment. It's keeping me sane. I'll pop the link down to the Patreon down in the description for you. For more delicious and quite often easy vegan recipes, head down under the video, you'll see the little like button. Tap that, then scroll across, tap subscribe. If you want to be alerted as soon as a new video drops every week, be sure to turn on notifications. While you're waiting for the next one, have a look at this.